please. Yes. And he has a background of the Technical University of Delft in smart energy and smart grid and sustainable energy, and he is going to introduce himself a bit further. So the floor is open to Ivo Hunink.
Thanks. Hello, everybody. My name is Ivo. I work for the city of The Hague and working on self-sovereign identity or digital identity in general. Quickly, what I do there, not only digital identity, but also smart energy systems. I'm part of the smart city team, you could say. And also in that smart city team, we work on edge computing for vision detection together with law enforcement, privacy, enhancing technologies in general, and sustainability. That's a little bit my focus here. And a bit of my background, I studied at TU Delft on innovation systems, so multi-stakeholder collaborations is what gets me going. I first got to know blockchain technology through my work for Energy Bazaar, decentralized energy systems and transactions within that. And afterwards I did some work for the Union of Development Organizations. They asked me to do a big review of blockchain for development, and that's where identity popped up for me for the first time. And started to learn about self-sovereign identity there. So that's a bit of the work that I've done. Well, for those that don't know what self-sovereign identity is, I was asked to do a bit of the introduction, also to give all the other speakers a bit more room to talk about their own content. If you want to have a really deep dive, there's a 1.5 hour webinar from Christopher Allen, one of the founding minds, you could say, of this field. But in short, self-sovereign identity is a ideology, a architecture, and it's becoming more and more a toolbox as well. And some of those tools you'll see today from the other speakers. And at its foundational level, it's a value-based approach or a principle-based approach. So this is what self-sovereign identity should be doing. And that's something that we always have to come back to, because not all applications of self-sovereign identity always adhere to these principles. So it's always in my evaluations, I always try to get back to these principles and see if we are really doing what the self-sovereign identity ideology prescribes us. I'm not going to read them all out to you. I think you can read them from the screen. But in short, what is the potential impact for self-sovereign identity? It's to increase privacy. There's a focus on data minimization, giving control and consent, but also a more efficient and effective administration, so less bureaucracy. And my belief, but that's something that still has to be validated and proven, is that it will also increase the resilience, or the, in a better word, anti-fragility of our societies, stronger digital communities. That's still an assumption until today. We'll get there maybe in the future. In very simple words, I have I think 4 or 5 slides that will increase in detail about what self-sovereign identity means. The most simple one is this one, compared to how we use the internet today with a number of accounts. Self-sovereign identity promises to go to a single way of interacting in the digital domain, very simply said. One of the other foundations of self-sovereign identity is this scheme. We call it the trust triangle. It's not really a triangle here because we have the bottom layer of the verifiable data registry, but in essence, it always contains a issuer, someone who issues a credential, validated information, gives it to a holder, someone that can take that credential, hold it in a wallet or a piece of paper if you want, and a verifier, a party that verifies that information that the holder presents. In essence, every process works like that within the self-sovereign identity domain. And I hope for this, the majority of people in this room, not too difficult of content. One layer deeper, and this is for us as a municipality one of the most interesting components of this architecture, the verifiable credential. Not to go into too much detail, don't read it all, but it consists of some metadata, some claims, and a digital proof. That's, for now, I think all I need to say about that. If you want to dive into that, I have some links. I'm not sure if the slides will be made available, but there are some links to the specifications of this specific data model that is being used. One more layer up, there's more than technology. There's a number of components, a number of layers that self-sovereign identity ecosystem exists of, where the layer 1 is where the cryptography comes in, the decentralized identifiers, let's say, that's the trust anchor of this whole point. That's also where the blockchain discussion comes in. We're not doing that one today here. There's the tooling and messaging. Later there will be a presentation from the Rabobank that will show their wallet. We have the credentials. That's where we as a municipality come in. We give out the information, whether you are a citizen of our society, maybe if you're in need of debt. We'll get to that later as well. And the governance, that's maybe the most hard one to solve here. I don't see that many confused faces yet. Just one slide about blockchain then. It does trigger a lot of discussion always. I think blockchain needs identity, that's for sure. I think you will all agree with that. And I think that identity could use blockchain, not in individual use cases, but if we look at an identity system for the whole of society, the security that blockchains can provide could be of use. But also there, this is still an assumption, and we still need to validate that by testing. And also the other terms that self-sovereign identity goes by, decentralized identities, attribute-based identities, for me they all fall a little bit in the same theme. Now, my final slide of the introduction about what is self-sovereign identity. It's not all beautiful future visions and everything's going to be great from now on. We also have to think about the negative impact that could happen. There's some people actively thinking about that. For example, Philip Sheldrake. It's good to note that his solution is not don't do SSI. No, he's basically advising people to go in a different direction in the SSI field. So won't go into that, but I know if you are critical, is this really a useful technology for society as a whole? Well, this article gives a different perspective on that as well, and things we need to take into account while designing this. Now, what do we as a municipality do with this to move a little bit away from that dystopia idea? I think we can do some beautiful stuff. And the first use case we started working on is the debt relief use case, where basically in the end we as a municipality provide the citizens that come to us for help, and we validate that they are in need of financial problems. We give them the digitally verifiable proof of that. And with that proof, they can go to their debt collectors, in this case the Central Debt Collection Agency, a government agency, and they can go to them and prove that they are in need of help. So when they get a fine, instead of raising the fine, they can actually make an automated payment agreement or stop the raising of the fine. And this is a process that until now required a lot of phone calls of public servants trusting each other that they could communicate. And we're doing this with a number of different organizations. So the Ministry of Justice and Security is involved, the Central Debt Collection Agency, which is part of the ministry, 2 municipalities and Lange Leopard as a company providing the SSI technology for us. It did take us almost 2 years to get this going. It was a long, long process. A lot of understanding that needed to be created about what is this technology, how does it work, where does that blockchain come in? You know, these kinds of questions took a long time to convince people of. But we convinced our Department of Social Affairs that it could be valuable. But while we were figuring that out, it took me, I think, 3 project proposals to get it accepted. We started with the Hague University of Applied Sciences, a learning module for students, because I felt that, you know, maybe my direct colleagues didn't really understand what we were doing there, but maybe we could make the civil servants of the future understand what this is, and maybe also learn something myself along the way. And I think in total we did about 40 student groups, did projects with them, thought of new use cases with them, and got a lot of people excited. Funny enough, the young people, they instantly knew what the problem was that we were trying to solve. They understood in their groins, you know, there's a data problem, the internet is broken, you know, they felt that too. So we got a lot of traction there. And also we went into a different kind of innovation program where we put self-sovereign identity at the core of the challenge. And that delivered basically 2 solutions to our challenges that both had a link to self-sovereign identity. And one of them, the one on the left, driving inclusive adoption of living labs, basically transformed into the next use case that we're piloting this month. Actually, on Thursday we have an important meeting with citizens about this. And there what we are issuing is a neighborhood credential. So basically digitally verifiable proof that someone is a citizen of a specific neighborhood. And the verifier in this case is an online community platform, a company, that is providing participation services to us. And normally we send out letters with unique codes and we need to make a big Excel sheet. Someone sent me a big Excel sheet of all the people in Kijkduin. I think I shouldn't receive that. But in the future with this technology, we could just make the conditions for getting access to this platform. Can you show a credential of the neighborhood that you are part of? So that's what we're testing right now with a very small group, just 9 people who volunteered to be part of this. But the first feedback from the third party, Hoppler, this the online platform, because we basically pushed this towards them, and they said, well, it's actually pretty easy to integrate. It works. So technically, it seems to be going quite smoothly there. And one thing we're starting now, which is a bit more abstract, but we got some funds available from ESIF, the European Self-Sovereign Identity Framework. Unfortunately, Daniel, who was supposed to speak later, is not here, but I think he was in the he was in the jury for that, so I wanted to thank him for it. And the idea there is to basically use the 2 credentials that we used in the pilots with the debt assistance and with the neighborhood agenda as basically an authentication to prove that you are part of an innovation community with us, so that we can keep onboarding, keep engaging the people that helped us innovate on this specific matter. And we're doing that together with Alchemio, which is a multi-stakeholder innovation community platform. A lot of buzzwords together. But they are doing really cool stuff where they put not organizations at the center of challenges, but the challenges itself, where different organizations from different fields of the sector can basically co-create solutions on those specific challenges. So we'll be going there as well. And I think the last slide that I have is one question that is right now bothering me, let's say, trying to get some work on, is where do we exactly fit as a municipality? I think we fit in that credential space. We give out a lot of information. We verify a lot of information. So we're definitely active there. But do we also have other responsibilities in the governance of such an ecosystem? And I don't know the answer to that yet. So if you know, come and talk to me later, and we can figure out how to do this. The questions are going to be later.
Yeah, the floor is open for questions. We can have a few. And I see somebody raising his hand. This is John-Erik Zetsaas.
So thanks for a great presentation, and it's really great to see that you're actually doing real scenarios with real people, and I mean that's what we need to do. And I like it. I mean the way you phrase it, you do have, you know, information, and you're an issuer. I assuming in a debt case there would be a verifiable credential saying I'm under debt protection or whatever that I could present, something like that.
That's what I initially thought.
Yeah.
Apparently, we're doing we're creating a signal that doesn't really have a place in the governance of debt yet.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, it's basically it's more in the sense of this person is in need of financial help.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
But,
so
the debt itself, there's more. Yeah.
Oh, okay. No.
Let's not get into that one.
Okay,
Yeah.
but I mean, you're issuing this verifiable credential stating that I'm in a special situation that you as a community know about. But what's the technology for the users? How do I, if I'm under debt, how do I get that? What do you use for that on that side?
Well, what we do there is it's very important that we do it while people are already with us. So it's basically in an onboarding conversation where we first determine is this person in need of help, and then we give them the option, okay, would you like to make use of this additional service that we have, where we issue that specific proof of this conversation to you, and in case that the Central Debt Collection Agency knocks at your door, you could present it to them if you like. And that's with the help of a wallet on their smartphone. But in theory, it could be a piece of paper with a QR code as well. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I also have a question. Do you have any new other use cases lining up, and how do you find your use cases?
Well, here, for example, we're just talking with the Rabobank people about the woningcorporaties. That could be next. Yeah, there's so many. To be honest, everywhere where information is validated or verified could be a potential use case. So for me, the thing I go towards most is where's the energy to change something? And I hope that the next one, and we have a project proposal lined up, is the digitization of waardepapieren, value papers.
Value papers, documents.
Which is basically a proof that someone is registered in our civil registration with name, address, birth date, BSN number. If that project proposal would come through, we would have a list of maybe 20, 25 different credentials that we could issue that society could make. Yeah.
So can we say that self-sovereign identity, or this architecture that you have described to us, is in what cases would it be? What is the common denominator? You need multiple parties. You need data integrity to be shared.
Yeah.
How would you describe
if you have two parties, then, well, actually, even if you only have the municipality, it could even work, because our processes often work with, do you even live in The Hague, which is another department. So
to validate something
you need to
from somebody or some party.
Yeah, it's validating information, storing that information locally on an individual's device or in a piece of paper if you want. And then verifying that specific information by a third party that trusts, and that there's still a component of trust that trusts the issuer for this. Yeah.
And in addition to that, you need some system or some mechanism to give these holders, validators, and issuers their role in the triangle.
Yeah,
that.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Any question from the room? Any more questions?
There, yeah.
Yes, I'm coming to you with a microphone.
So regarding the debt use case, how are other uitvoeringsorganisaties such as the tax agency feeling about this? Because I mean, it's nice if the CEB is in, but there are way more knocking on your door.
Yeah, for sure. This is a way of looking at it. You know, we are very used, especially in government, to say, okay, we need to have one central place where everybody everything at one point in one project needs to be arranged. And what I think is the beauty of this is where we can just issue that credential. And if a debt collector, no matter what kind of organization it is, decides to accept that credential as a valid piece of information, they can. They don't need to be part of some sort of project or whatever. They can just say, hey, this is something that we trust. Right now, the conversation is starting with the debt relief ecosystem, let's say. And there's a lot of different projects that have a similar intention, but a different technical foundation, let's say, and they are now coming together. So the City of Amsterdam, I'm not sure if the tax agency is involved, but a lot of important organizations active in that field are now starting to come around this. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We have one more question, and we have to keep it short because we have a next speaker. This gentleman was before you, but in the end of these two sessions, we will have open space for more generic questioning, a whole slot. So your turn will come.
Hi, it's a little bit related to the previous one. If I live in The Hague and I move to another city and I have this document, what happens? Can I reuse it? Are there some discussion between other cities?
Yeah, this is an area of active work, I would say. So right now we're in the stage where these kinds of credentials are starting to pop up, and we're for the first time actively dealing with them. The next step would be to make agreements on a national level between cities about, okay, is there a standard credential that we can use for all the cities? There is one. I just said that the next project would be the value papers. There is already a group of smaller cities that are, I think it's 13 of them, that have joined each other in one project for these value papers. So we would be, if I think so, we should be joining them, let's say, and use the same credential scheme as they do. Yeah. But there needs to be some sort of
interoperability and standardization, maybe.
Yeah, credential registries is what we're talking about now. TNO is doing some work on that. Yeah, it's active work. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I think you've given us a good first insight into self-sovereign identity, how it works, what it could be used for, and that a lot of creativity can make a lot of more use cases.
A lot of fun stuff to do in the future. So.
As I just said, in the end of the day, we will have a final slot, 20-25 minutes for discussions and questions to all of the speakers that we have today in the afternoon. So if any questions are still there, the final session of today will give you ample opportunity to pose them here. Thank you very much, Ivo Hunink. And our next speaker, Peter Verkoulen, did I pronounce that correct? Verkoulen.
Verkoulen.
Verkoulen. And Peter is the coalition manager of the Dutch Blockchain Coalition, and they exist for a few years already. And I remember being in their first stream, work stream 1, named Digital Identities. And well, I think Peter is going to enlighten us, not just for a municipality scheme with use cases, but now on the Dutch country level on blockchain and potential use cases and activities. So, Peter Verkoulen.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm the coalition manager of the Dutch Blockchain Coalition. I also work for TNO, and the rest of my time, 4 days coalition, 3 days the Gaia X Hub in the Netherlands. So that fits exactly between Monday till Sunday of a week. A little bit squeezing now and then. Gaia X I'm not going to say anything about, but it's the next generation data infrastructure, you could say, an open, transparent digital ecosystem to share data, to make data available, services available. And actually there is, from that perspective, a lot of relation also between the two topics. Some people think it's completely different developments, but if you look a little bit under the hood, you could say, then there's a lot of resemblance and also a lot of, let's say, parties acting in both ecosystems that will find one another. But I will not go into detail about that today. That will be another topic. So let's say one step back from what Ivo just said, look a little bit at, let's say, the drivers for self-sovereign identity and decentralization of digital identity. And well, the first bullet says government wants to put citizens in control of their own data. Of course, you could also completely rephrase this. It's also me as an individual wants to have control of my own data. And by the way, Ivo mentioned already, there's always also in an SSI perspective issues to think of. So one of the, let's say, issues related to this very first bullet is, of course, should I, for instance, help my older mother? Is she fully capable of determining herself what she wants to do with her data, or does she need any help? Can she really be self-sovereign from that perspective? Yeah, and then you can also say, yeah, but in the current world, she's putting things on Facebook, etc., and well, probably not even thinking about what she's doing. So, but these are all kinds of, let's say, discussions that you get when you're working on these kinds of solutions. Of course, we see, let's say, breaches of data. If you put everything together in one big database and you get a leak, yeah, then also the issue is much bigger than when you would have, let's say, an individual issue with an individual wallet only having my individual data made available. But also from that perspective, big companies, but also public organizations thinking, well, I get a lot of data from my customers or from the individuals with whom I have a relationship. Do I really need this data? Because I also have to watch over it. I have to guide it. I mean, if you look at, let's say, the traditional mortgage application process, yeah, you have a big envelope and you put 3 centimeters of paper in it, information about your income and about your tax payments and well, whatever you need for that. And then those 3 centimeters of paper go to bank, and the bank has to do something with it. It has to so not even in the digital side, but they have to guide it. And the only thing that has to happen really is, at a certain moment in time, we have to validate that I will be able to pay my mortgages. And after they've made the assessment, they only have to say, okay, I did this check for Verkoulen. I did it based on, let's say, trustworthy information. And it's now fine. We have given him this mortgage, and I can forget about it. So that's a complete different way of looking at things, obviously. Well, you mentioned it already. Let's say self-sovereign identity, digital identity is already from the start of the DBC about 5 years ago a very important topic that we're working on in a setting of, let's say, public organizations, companies and knowledge institutes, because the DBC is a triple helix organization. And well, you could say the first 2 or 3 years was really about what is this? Really learning with one another, so to say. The second period was we do very small experiments. You have heard some examples of Ivo, and you will see a lot of examples more during this afternoon. And I think we are now also, and some of the questions related also to that, coming to a stage where you say, okay, but now we are scaling up. And then you get also questions like, yeah, but okay, I now live in The Hague and I've moved to Amsterdam, and what happens then? So you get all kinds of new questions, but of course, yeah, in the scaling up phase, that's what you will meet. Now, like I said, there is a lot happening at the moment, and like I think that what we are doing within the coalition is only a small part of that. You will hear some of the developments this afternoon. And I will not say anything about them on this slide, but I want to mention a few topics. One is that I think since about a year or two, you see that, let's say, Dutch government is also very active in this topic. They've made a vision paper about digital identity. They're also thinking about the digitale bronidentiteit, the digital source identity, if that would be the correct English translation. Of course, the interaction also on a European level. I was hoping that Daniel would tell something about EPSI, so you have to have that for next time. But of course, yeah, we are only Netherlands and we are in a bigger international environment. Yeah, and the other things that were mentioned here, I will come back either in my presentation or it will be in the presentation of the next speakers. If you look back to that period, those initial days, and people involved in the DBC will know that the term parasol group. That was a number of companies and organizations that have stood literally below an umbrella and said, well, we have to speed up things. And at that time, people thought, well, what we now need is a kind of set of agreements, afsprakenstelsel in Dutch, that we can set up. And then everybody can, if we have developed, once we have developed that, everybody can use SSI as a method, so to say. And then we found out that actually that was a little bit too early. So what we did in the past year, I think, with people again from those three elements in the triple helix, is setting up a vision paper, so to say, where we are really talking about design principles, what you should think of when, let's say, developing SSI solutions. But also, I gave already an example about the issues that you could come to, and that you also have to think about then. On our website, the first version of this paper has been published. And now in the second part of this year, we are gathering all kinds of input. So if you are interested, have a look and participate with us, because the only way to bring this further is to really collaborate with one another. So we will bring it to the next version, yeah, probably before the end of the year, but also it will continue to be work in progress, obviously. Then from a more, let's say, practical point of view, the so-called Dutch Trust Framework. Within the DBC, you see a lot of work going on specific use cases. And one of the use cases we have been working on with a number of companies and organizations was unlock the idea of what we have all been doing today, showing a credential saying that we have either been tested negatively or vaccinated, or we have been ill in the last 6 months and recovered, and only sharing that one of those three things is true and nothing else. So we had also a solution for that. In the end, in the Netherlands, the health ministry has developed their own solution, which has SSI characteristics, I would say, but also still leaves something to be desired, but that's another discussion. When working on this, we said, well, we are working now also on, let's say, a general foundation on which you build this use case, and it would be a little bit pity actually if we would do only for that specific use case, because you can think of thousands of other use cases to build on that foundation. And that's why we started the DTN initiative to have a, let's say, a generic infrastructure in the Netherlands available that you can use for this, but also because you could also argue, well, you just mentioned EPSI, that's actually the European version of DTN, or a little bit more modest, DTN is the Dutch version of EPSI. You could say, well, just wait for, let's say, the European level to come up with this, and then we will be using it. But in the Netherlands, we've said we want to actively, let's say, influence also the developments in Europe, and you can only do that when you are doing hands-on work yourself and bring your experiences to the European level. But also, yeah, we need this layer to build our use cases on. And if we are going to wait for other results to be ready first, yeah, then we can just sit and look at the nice weather again now. But we want to be able to do things and to develop actively. So that's why we did this. It was mentioned already in Evos discussion a little bit. When scaling up, you get all kinds of questions. For instance, there will be many wallets that people can use. What about interoperability? Will I have to have a wallet for each, let's say, interaction that I'm going to have with a city or with a company or whatever? Or can that all be in one, and how will the communication go? And one of the ideas actually by TNO, which was developed during the Odyssey Momentum Hackathon in the SSI track that DigiCampus and the Dutch Blockchain Coalition sponsored, was the idea of developing what's mentioned here, the PayPal of SSI, to make sure that could be a way to solve the interoperability problem that we were just mentioning, because that could be the, let's say, the connection between all those, let's say, individual initiatives. But then, stepping back again, one of the issues of that you should also think about, now we have a central, let's say, entity again in the play, and do we really want this? SSI, wasn't that also about decentralization, about no man in the middle, and isn't this a man in the middle? And what does this man in the middle, and is this really a problem, or do we accept this? So you could also think about other schemes to ensure interoperability. So this is a way of resolving this, but there will be probably others in the future. Other topic also developed in that same Momentum event, in this case TNO and Rabobank and several others, was the, I think the question was from that side. There can be all kinds of credentials. Let's say, where is the catalog of credentials that I, let's say, from an individual know where I can, let's say, get my credentials that I can use to do my work in digital life. But also a verifier has to know, comparable to the real, let's say, physical situation. If somebody's working at Schiphol from the border patrol, he has, and he gets a Spanish passport or a Korean passport or whatever. Yeah, he has to know what, let's say, the characteristics of that passport should be to let's say, let somebody into the country. So you need this, let's say, specification. So that's why the idea has come up to build, let's say, a catalog, telephone hits to let's say, catalog all the credentials that all will be probably not possible, but in a telephone book there are so many, let's say, telephone numbers, and with that you can work then, obviously. Again, this would then also be some kind of central facility. So is that the problem? Who decides what comes into the phone book and what doesn't? I mean, in a phone book I can just register and say my number should be in there. How will that work in this case? That's all work in progress, I would say. A lot of use cases going on. You can find some examples on our website, and this is only, let's say, the top of the top of the top of the iceberg, really. But there is a lot going on that we can learn from, and I think that also is what we are doing right now. So we have all those use cases. It will lead to some best practices, but we will have to share that with one another, learn with one another. Not only look, let's say, at our technical challenges, but like I said already, governments, legal questions. I mean, in the COVID situation now, there's a very clear example. If I go to work, can my employer verify that I've been tested, yes or no? Now, according to law, no is the answer, but maybe we want this. So that's also something that we have to discuss with one another. In what society do we want to live? But also, the other thing, I mean, this technology makes it easier to, let's say, verify information. Do we want to live in such a in such an environment, in such a society, or should we, let's say, also leave something, let's say, under the blanket, so to say? So it's not only about the technical challenges, but it's definitely also about ethical questions, legal questions, governance questions. I think that this concludes what I would like to say as an introduction, follow-up introduction on SSI. And if there are any questions now or later in the panel, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, any questions from the room? No questions? Yes, Eefje?
Can you maybe reflect on the statement made by Ivo before that, what was it again? Blockchain needs identity, but identity could use identity.
Yeah, Yeah, so
identity could use blockchain, sorry.
yeah, let's say I fully agree with that. I sometimes say that it sounds maybe a little bit strange, somebody saying that he is working for the Dutch Blockchain Coalition, that I don't care so much about blockchain. We could, maybe it would have been better if he would have called it the Dutch Digital Trust Coalition or something like that. I think that, let's say, blockchain has some characteristics that you can use it in a very good way to, let's say, implement SSI. But you saw also IRMA on one of my slides. So you can also use other technology, and that's perfectly fine. And in the, let's say, in the end situation where you have this interoperability, standardization is very important. It was also said already. Maybe solutions like I mentioned, the interoperability engine. Yeah, then also it doesn't really matter. There will be. You can imagine that, for instance, the government relating to this basic identity will have some, let's say, challenges, some demands, and say, well, okay, if you want to, let's say, put my digital base identity in this wallet, then at least it has to satisfy these and these and these and these and these requirements. But as long as you do that, and then that's fine with me, and then the technology doesn't really matter.
Yes, Katrina.
Following on from that, I just had a chance at lunchtime to have a look at the Mozilla objection to the DID core standard with this question of blockchain and SSID. And it seems their objection is the use of proof of work, which is not a requirement. So it's more a call out to say this message that it's an option, but it's not foundational, because I think it's putting many of the great things that you're doing in this work at risk when people think that blockchain is mandatory, yep, and then make an assumption even about first generation blockchains rather than the range of distributed ledgers, and then we end up arguing over something for a few years and the work is held up, yeah?
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, we still now and then get remarks like, what about, let's say, the energy consumption? And we forget, or people asking questions like that forget that there have been new developments that have overcome that. The other thing is, hey, but blockchain was about not forgetting anything. So how can I put personal data on a blockchain? Yeah, but so that's also not what's happening. We use the blockchain, like Ivo mentioned in his, he said we have the trust triangle and we have the decentralized verification infrastructure. Well, there blockchain plays a role, but we are not going to put the personal data of a person onto the blockchain. And yeah, there are many more of those prejudices and myth and misunderstandings. So thank you very much for pointing that out.
Yeah, very valuable additions. Thank you. Yeah. And governance, I think. I have a question on the legal part, because I know that there are 3 banks in your coalition. You have Port of Rotterdam, many different parties from different industries. You mentioned the triple helix, which is government, academia and business, if I say this correctly. Yep. How do they work together in the legal sense? Because I can imagine that liability, if something goes wrong with a different validator or issuer, how do you set yourself up legally? Because it could be maybe making parties hesitant to really start things in production and relying on your solutions. Yeah. How do you manage that?
Yeah, well, it's important to realize that, let's say, in let's say the work where the DBC is involved, it's obviously still always in early phases, in early stages. So we have some discussions about this, but then we say, yeah, okay, but this is still in a kind of, let's say, experimental setting, and we discuss who is doing what, and we make some agreements about that, and then that's okay. If you're scaling up and really going to production, yeah, then, for instance, if you look at that DTN initiative, one of the bullets on that slide was something like setting up the governance structure and the legal entity. Yeah, then you need contracts, and you say, okay, this infrastructure will be, let's say, facilitated by A, B, and C, and A will do that, and B will do that, and C will do that, and the liability is arranged like that. And even when we, for instance, with Unlock did some experiments, we had contracts, let's say, making sure that he does that, she does that, and I do that, and that we can also look at one another when somebody's not performing. You need that component, and that's also why it's nice to have, for instance, CMS and Pels Rijke on there, because we have those the legal, let's say, capabilities that we can mobilize in the coalition, but also the legal faculty of the University of Leiden, who is very active in there.
Okay. So that's helping you to solve something that may become blocking. More room for questions later in the panel. Thank you very much, Peter Verkoulen.
Welcome.
And now, finally, in this session, we have two people from Rabobank. Larissa Wezenberg, lead user experience at Rabobank and innovation manager, and knows all about front-end development and usability. And Joris Lange, the web developer. Yes. So both of you are going to show us the real thing, really a demo of a use case called Datakeeper. So the floor is to you.
Yes, I think I have to wait a minute, maybe. Okay, we can start. Yes, thank you. Thank you for joining the Datakeeper story. Datakeeper is an digital identity wallet, like Peter and Ivo already mentioned in their schemes. And I think within 2 or 3 years, hopefully, everybody in the Netherlands and Europe has a digital identity wallet on his phone. At least I hope this audience has. And I think that will be the next future. My name is Joris Lange, lead of this beautiful creative team. And today I join Larissa, my colleague within Datakeeper. She's, as mentioned, the lead of our design. To talk about Datakeeper, but more important, to show how Datakeeper works. Because there's a real product, and the product is already in production. So what is Datakeeper? And maybe a small detail, because we said Datakeeper, we said Rabobank. Datakeeper is an innovation within Rabobank, still 100% owned by Rabobank. But Rabobank believes in our mission, and I will tell later about it. And it also suits for 100% with the data manifesto of Rabobank, because the data manifesto of Rabobank says that the consumer should always be in control of their own data. And that's what also Datakeeper is all about. And you heard it also in the stories of Ivo and Peter. So what is Datakeeper? A personal digital safe on your phone, decentralized. And that's very important. In this wallet you can store your personal validated data, like your ID or your income or your credentials from your certificates for schools and universities. And with this wallet we give people the full control of the data, of the full control of your own data, the principles of SSI resumes. And we use data minimization. In the demo, Larissa will show 2, I think, perfect examples of using data minimization. And we share only the necessary data which should be shared. We share not all the data, only the data points which should be shared. And what's our mission? And I think also Peter said it before. I think we have 2 missions, one from consumer perspective, again, give the consumer the full control. But there's also a mission from organizational perspective. We validate a lot of different use cases, and we see what we can do is to make the processes of organizations more efficient, but also GDPR-proof, becoming compliant. Important statement for companies, and I think with digital identity wallets, companies can be compliant. How does it work? Of course, the demos will tell you everything, but in small steps. I go to a website of a provider. I want to sell, I want to buy a product or service, so I scan the QR code with my Datakeeper wallet in this case. I get in my wallet, there appears a data information request with the necessary data, because I need, I rent a car, for instance, I need my ID, I need my driver's license. I get an information request in my wallet. I go to my wallet and I collect the necessary information. So I get my driver's license, I get my passport credentials, maybe I need also some credit card numbers, whatever. I collect the necessary data and I share it with my consent, with my full consent, with the relying party, with the provider again. Case closed. That's all that has to be done. And Larissa will show it later on. I said it's a real product, Datakeeper, and it is, because we did over the last 1.5 years, I think more than 11 pilots with different companies. In the beginning of the year, we helped the Field Lab events to get entrance again to events with the Datakeeper wallet. We did some pilots with social housing. We did 2 pilots with quite big social housing institutes in the Netherlands. We just finished it in August. Next week, we will start a pilot with commercial rental. That's about the demo is about. And we are already in production with a car rental company who uses Datakeeper for renting cars. And what did we validate it? We validated a lot, but Datakeeper as a solution, we see it saves time for consumers and also for the company, avoids complexity and fraud, is GDPR proof, and helps us as a consumer to trust what is going on with my personal data. And I think that's one of the most important things. And personally, I'm very happy there's becoming more and more room for such ideas like Datakeeper or other identity wallets, because I think the Netherlands and maybe also Europe and the rest of the world is ready for solutions like this. In a demo, Larissa will demonstrate how it works. It's not a real-life demo with Larissa. That was a little bit too risky at this event. But I think we can show a very nice demo.
Yes, yes.
This one?
I do need the clicker, yes. I think that will help. I will demonstrate in a little bit a demo that is actually about to go, a pilot that is about to go live by the end of this week or starting next week, together with BPD, which is a real estate agent, and OSRE, which is a platform where a tenant that is renting a house can hand in all of their documents and all of their data. But Datakeeper is connected to the OSRE platform, so most documents will be handed over to the real estate agent or rental agency by Datakeeper. So that is also what I'm going to show you in the demo. It's a video. I recorded it before so that nothing would happen here while I'm showing you. As you can see on the screen, the first screen is already inside the OSRE portal, where I am applying for a house. And I need to provide a little bit of personal information, so I need to tell a little bit more about my marital status, my household, how many people I have at home. So in this case, I'm putting that I'm single, and my household has only one person in that case. And I do not have kids. So it's important to note that this data is, of course, non-verified data, whereas the data that's coming from Datakeeper is verified. I then put in my preferences, so what kind of house I want, and I tell a little bit more about the living situation I'm currently in and the working situation. So I am fully employed, full-time contract, and I am working, and this is really important for the Datakeeper data request to know what kind of data still needs to be asked by Datakeeper. There are a couple of documents that can be uploaded through the OSRE portal, since Datakeeper doesn't contain or doesn't have all of the data documents yet, but you will see in a little bit what we do provide. And the big difference then is with Datakeeper that this is complete verified data, so it's all coming from the source, and we also apply data minimization. In this phase of the demo, I'm allocating myself a unit, so I've gotten a house. It's in Berlin. It's a really nice apartment, so I'm going to accept the house. And as soon as I accept the house, there's a question being asked what kind of bank I use. Rabo space bank, that's a small typo still in this test environment. And then I can allocate, I can send myself a Datakeeper verification. So through the Datakeeper verification, it's an email which contains a QR code so that I'm able, just as Joris already explained, scan the QR code, and then I'm able to share all of my data with the rental agency. So this is what it looks like. The tenant gets an email. The tenant clicks on the link inside the email, and a QR code shows up. So this is a QR code. If I do not have the Datakeeper app yet, and I scan it, then it will take me directly to the app and Play Store, and then the Datakeeper data request is already inside the app. But since I already have the app on my phone, I will show you what that flow looks like. So we have a onboarding flow, which explains to the user what the app is all about. Keep it safe, keep it simple, keep it yours. You're the only one that's able to access your data, and you are the one that decides who you share it with. So that's what the onboarding screens tell the user. Then we have the terms and conditions, so the user can accept the terms and conditions, and we have a 6-digit PIN code to make the app extra secure, 6 digits, which can be repeated then again for the onboarding. We also have Face ID, of course, which is user-friendly, so it's easy to log in. And then I'm ready to start my wallet. So you can see in the navigation bar there's a functionality which says Scan QR. And with that functionality, I'm able to scan the QR code and get a data request inside my wallet and see a full, complete shopping list of what data is necessary for me to send to be able to qualify for a house. So I'm going to scan this QR code, and I'm going to accept the data request that's going to go into my wallet. And then you see a full shopping list of the data that is needed for me to send to be able to qualify for a house. So this is my identity, which can be passport or ID card. For finance, a bank account is asked, so this can be this is IBAN. And the working history and salary. So this is retrieved by UWV. And not all data, again, of these documents is being stored or stored inside this data request. Only the necessary data from all of these documents are taken. So when I start with passport, I scan the passport. This goes all through Innovalor technology, through their SDK and Read ID. There's an NFC chip inside the passport that I can scan to get all of my passport data. And then you see an overview of all of the data that is retrieved from this passport. So this is all stored inside of my Datakeeper, but only part of it is being sent. So as you can see in the passport, it's only last name, first name, valid until, and date of birth. So these are the data points that will be sent then to the rental agency. Then I can add my bank account. I select Rabobank. And it will take me to the Rabobank environment to be able to give consent to share my IBAN number with Datakeeper. So this is what I've done. This happens through PSD2. Since this is dummy data, you don't see my full name here. So it's the full name and it's IBAN that is retrieved. And lastly, it's the working history and the salary that I'm going to take from UWV. I have to log in with my DigiD to be able to fetch this data, so I will not share my login details here. Then there's an SMS verification that is also asked to be able to retrieve the data. And then you see a full list of what is taken from UWV, but it's only the past 12 months of salary. Since we don't think verifiers need the full working history, we limit it to 12 months. Together with BPD, we, of course, organize this. So here, the user sees a full list of all the data points that are being sent from each document. We're completely transparent about what we're sending. You can expand also these documents to see what's inside and what you're about to send. And before the user actually hits send, we also warn the user because it might be that they somehow doubt they don't want to send this data, or they just don't want to. So that you see in the next screen. there is a pop-up here where the user still has to give explicit consent to send this data. So we make it really clear to the user that you're sending it. It's not sharing like a Google Doc or Google Drive. It's really sending your data, because that's something we cannot do anything about at this point. So here the OSRE portal also shows that the verification is finished. And the user can download the PDF with all of the data points that were just sent by Datakeeper. So this is to keep an overview for yourself to see what data you've just sent. And this same PDF is also shown on the back end, on the OSRE side. Of course, there's a rental agency behind it that needs to check all of the applications and wants to see if a user is or a tenant is qualified for a house. So there's this backend where you see my application, and there's a tab called Files, Datakeeper Files, and here you see the exact same document. And this is 100% verified data. And that is actually the demo. So I can imagine there's some questions still. I wanted to dive in quickly to 2 more features. I don't know if there's still time.
Yes, you have 5 more minutes.
Okay, perfect. The PSD2 transaction engine and zero knowledge proof. These are 2 features inside the Datakeeper app that we're working on. Currently, I will skip to the next slide. So the first feature that I want to highlight is zero knowledge proof. Zero knowledge proof is a feature where we do not send across the actual data, so for example income or someone's age, but only the proof with a check mark, yes, this person is 18 plus, or yes, this person has an income above 23,000, which I think is in the example screen. So this is something that we have already implemented for 2 pilots, the Alliantie and Woonzorg Nederland, which is also 2 organizations that rent out apartments. So there we were able to prove that the tenants had a certain income in between 23,000 and 40,000 or something, I think. And that way they didn't have to send across their actual income. And this is what we hope to do much more in the future, and that this is fully accepted also. Because what we saw with this use case is that they would rather still get the PDF of the actual income because of regulation and the whole system, which of course is not made for this feature yet, but we hope that it will be very soon, so that we're applying data minimization altogether. And then there's another functionality, PSD2 transaction engine. We do not have this live yet. We're building this currently, and this is
Maybe it's good to mention what PSD2 means, because not everybody comes from a bank.
Yes, PSD2 creates the connection with all the other banks. So being able to fetch transaction data, not only from Rabobank, but also from ABN AMRO, ING. You also have a functionality inside your banking app to be able to add other bank accounts in there, which are not from your own bank. So that is PSD2, and the transaction engine behind this that we are currently building is fetching transaction data, so it could be from Rabobank, ING, or ABN. And this transaction data is categorized into different categories such as expenses or income. And expenses is then again put into categories such as mortgages or rent. And what it does, this whole engine, is calculate a consistency score to check whether you have been able to consistently pay, for example, your rent in the past. So we take transactions from 1 year back and we check whether you've paid your rent on the same date every month, and if it's the same amount. Based on whether you've paid this on the same date and every month, the same amount, it gives a very high consistency score. So we do not share any transaction data with the verifier, but we are able to provide some kind of score which tells the verifier, okay, maybe you should dive into this person a little bit more because their consistency score is low. So this is a functionality that we're still working on, and which also still has a lot of compliance, legal issues that we still have to cover and look into. And that's it from my side. Okay. Are there questions? And oh, if you want to download the app, you have to scan this QR code.
Okay, that's a very important addition. So what other use cases do you have in mind? Are there new developments that you are looking at?
A lot of developments, and I think I also mentioned there's a wide range of use cases, and this morning we talked about identity and access management on remote. I think that's a very interesting use case we are looking now for, but also in the travel branch, or also outside the banks, there are a lot of interesting use cases.
Yeah, maybe with the help of the Payment Service Directive to data insights, that could add value as well, I think. Are there more questions from the room? I see 3. We have some time. I'm starting from the left.
Hi, goedemiddag. Actually, 2 questions. One is there any protection from parties that maybe over-ask information?
It's a good question, and I think in one way we needed a sort of, what Peter says, a trusted network, a sort of ecosystem. At this moment there isn't, because there is in our case we call it the verifier, decides which data he needs. He has an obligation to be GDPR proof, but I understand that is still a little bit too short, you know, and we can do a check as a Datakeeper wallet. But it's the responsibility of a verifier to ask for the right data. But I think when we are one step further, there will be an ecosystem of controlling the issuers, of controlling the holders, the data, the identity wallets, and the verifiers. Okay. I think that's needed.
And the second question is, you could consider this also, I mean, I see the need, but you could consider it also a task of the federal government to come up with something like that. Has that been a topic? And, you know, what was the thinking?
Yes, that is a topic, and in the polls I discussed also with Wouter. I think it's not a task from the government, it's not a task from private companies. I think it's a combination. You have to believe that the consumer, the citizens, has full control over the data. And I think that's something we have to do together in combination of private and public sectors.
Does that answer your question? Yes. There were 2 more questions here. Yes.
Actually, my question is rather about the whole set and the idea behind the wallet, because you mentioned it's a data keeper, but actually also distributes data. And Larissa already mentioned not all companies regulate the idea that you need to validate the data. Because, for example, a rental company can say, if you're older than 18, it's fine with me. You don't share the birth of date, for example. So that's maybe a pain point where you say the wallet itself distributes the data, and maybe you can trust the wallet, but when the data has been distributed, maybe you will not trust the rental company.
I think that's something we have to explore together. Yeah. And it's a task of the wallet, the holder, but also of the ecosystem. I think also, yeah.
And you can decide what to share and when to share, but do you have also an option to terminate the data that you have shared? So when you say
right to be forgotten, how does that come into play?
You can. There's already an option in the wallet that you can delete your data, but also, and that's we are creating is to revoke your consent or to revoke information. And I think that's also there will be also a role of the ecosystem. It is a trust ecosystem that when you send for revoke, that the data is also really revoked from the verifiers episode. Datakeeper is not storing the data. You as a holder, you are storing your data on your phone. Datakeeper has no contact with that data, or Rabobank has no contact with the data. It's a decentralized data wallet. So you are the only one who has access to this data, and you can decide to revoke it. And I think together again, we should create an ecosystem that when you revoke it, it will be really revoked.
Okay. Yeah. Then there was one more question before we go having a break and having some coffee. Yes, Koen.
Yes, thank you. So I was wondering, I think there are already raised some valid challenges, but I think one of the other challenges will be linking identity over different data sources. So in your example, I saw you had to share your name 3 times, but are you also working on making sure that only my data is actually in the wallet and not maybe my data and some of your data and maybe Wouter's data as well, and that I can combine this and get a maybe a more expensive house or a cheaper one for social rental?
Yeah, and I think we have also features like the liveness check, that the you is really you, and that are important. I think that are important features to prove that the data is yours. So I think that's one example of how we try to, keep it.
But that means that there is like my core identity as a starting point, but how do you then make sure that the other data that I get in is also my data and not yours?
Yeah. No, that's a very good question. I hadn't thought about that also. Aggregating someone else's attributes, that's what you're referring to.
Yeah.
Interesting questions. We'll come back to that later. We now have a 15-minute break for coffee. After the break, we'll have Jan-Erik Setsaas from Signicat from Norway, the first speaker. And Eefje is going to tell us, Eefje van der Harst, about the numbers and wallets that we are flooded with, because I think it was Peter who said the time is ripe for identity wallets, and Evie has done some research. How many do we have, what do you do, and so on. And Sterre Demrede, that's her, from TNO, is supporting Evie. So that's for after the break, 50 minutes break. Thank you.
Ah, nice.
Thanks so much.